Gotcha.
Hey, how's it going everybody? It's theGameconomist, and today we'll be taking a look at the Great Corvian Scythe. There are only 4 Reapers in the game, and this is probably the best one. It has, first of all, better range than the others, and that's really important, obviously. And then it has higher overall damage, it can be infused and buffed, and it has higher bleed if you're going to do a bleed build, which I don't recommend. I want to talk a little bit about the build. Basically, I had to choose between a sharp build or a dark build. Now, if you go sharp, you can either go sharp buff or you can go sharp vitality. I would probably recommend sharp vitality if you go with sharp. I don't really think a buffed build would be very good on this weapon just because you're not really able to pressure your opponent. The running attack and the R2 jumping attack, you can mix them up to kind of be a little less predictable and harder to dodge, but regardless of that, your opponent can consistently dodge both of those. So you're not going to be able to pressure appropriately on a buffed build. So sharp vitality is an option. I went with the other option. I went with full damage on a dark build. Basically, you can go dark and take int and faith up to 30, and then you can actually still invest points in sharp because the scaling in sharp is still not bad. It's not really good, but it's not bad. So I got higher overall damage on the dark build, and it has another nice attribute. So the weapon already has natural piercing, which is the reason why you would consider taking sharp in the first place. But guess what? When you go dark damage, it just has better piercing, right? It's more of a good thing. You get the natural piercing plus the dark chip damage, and it was just shredding through shields. Like, I fought a guy who was using the Havel shield, you'll see that in the gameplay, and it was just cutting right through that. It was so ridiculous. So I went with the dark build. I think, if I had to guess, is the best overall build, just because I know armor and vitality do help, but it's kind of marginal. It doesn't always drop you beneath a damage, kind of like a damage breakpoint. It doesn't always drop you below that, the armor does. So I think the dark build is probably the best. You also get access to the Dragon Head shield, you get access to the Filianor chime, obviously. You're going to be able to use the lightning bomb. So there's a lot of reasons you might consider the dark over the sharp vitality build. Let's talk a little bit about the moveset on this weapon. Basically, the two-handed R1, the kind of the key note here is that it's longer than just about everything in the game. The only thing that really outranges it is maybe the washing pole, and the St. Bident barely outranges it, okay? So your two-handed R1 is extremely long and allows you to punish just about everything. That being said, the two-handed R1 comes out about the same speed as a greatsword. So if you're fighting somebody who's really skilled at dodging and they got a fast little reactive weapon, it can actually still be really hard to hit them. You basically have to act as if you were going to trade with them, but instead you're punishing their attack and you're staying out of their range. So it's kind of like using a greatsword, except if the greatsword had really good range and no poise. Okay, that's a great way to think about it. It's similar to a greatsword, no poise, better range. In fact, it's much longer than the Onyx Blade even. So, this is a long-range weapon where you can't trade, but you can outspace a lot of weapons. You also aren't able to pressure very well with this weapon. I already mentioned that when we were talking about doing a buffed build. The running attack is very, very slow. A lot of players are going to be able to dodge it. You have the R2. The only reason the R2, the running R2, the only reason that lands is because players think the running R1 is going to come out, so they time their dodge wrong, and you end up catching them at the end of their roll with the running R2. Okay, so for your approach, you can use running R1 and then mix up the running R2 in there. The problem with that is they're both actually consistently dodgeable if the other player understands what you're trying to do. Also, the R2, the running R2, is very punishable, right? It's going to be a critical or whatever kind of hit that is, the special kind of hit where it deals more damage and there's kind of pow, you know, there's that noise that comes out, right? You're going to get punished really bad if they predict the running R2 and they're smart. If they have a fast weapon like a Pontiff Knight Curved Sword, I wouldn't risk it. Alright, and some other things to note about the moveset. Reapers are kind of strange. You want to hit them with the very tip of the weapon. If you hit them while they're close to you, you'll actually do less damage. You'll hit them with like the staff or something. The R2 is shorter range than the R1, and it seems to be better used for opponents who are trying to crowd you. The last thing I'll mention is the hitbox is kind of like a diagonal swing most of the time, and so you kind of have to get used to thinking of the Corvian Great Scythe almost like a spear. because a lot of the time if your opponent is to your left or to the right, that diagonal swing is just going to go right over their head. It's really annoying. Alright, so we've talked about the build, we've talked about the moveset. Let's talk about how it performs in duels. For the most part, it actually does very well. What's surprising about it is that because of its excellent range, you can have a really great punish game against long swords as well as curved swords. Yeah, both of those were too short. They would try to approach and they couldn't get to me in time because I could start my R1 early, and that would force them to retreat. And then basically I would punish them when they thought they were in range. Really, really simple. The problem you start running into is anybody using a spear or a katana. Okay, and if your opponent is clever, they'll actually swap over to that, like a deep washing pole or a dark washing pole, depending on what kind of build they have. The Great Corvian Scythe doesn't really have a solution to anybody who's very skilled with the running attack. So you could use the Black Knight shield, I guess, to try and help out with that, but that doesn't improve the speed of your attack. You know, if you block their running attack and then you come out with your R1, they're already gone. They've already rolled away. There's just no way to punish them. You can use, what I found best is you can use the crossbow and you can use the dragon edge shield to help with both of those situations. However, in the long run, it just felt kind of weak. It really did. It felt like the worst matchup for the Great Corvian Scythe was going to be the spear or the katana, and somebody who really knows how to use those weapons, right? What was another interesting thing about this weapon was its matchups against ultra weapons. It was a slaughter. It was so easy. I could stay out of their range the whole game and punish them with R1 combos. You know, if I'm using like a spear versus an ultra great weapon, I can like come in with the running attack a lot of the time. With this, it doesn't matter that your R1's kind of slow. You can just straight up punish their neutral R1s. It was amazing. Against great swords, it was okay. Great swords, you can generally outspace them. They have about the same speed as you do, though. And if they actually outspace you, if it's the other way around, they're going to win because they're going to outpoise you. So it was about even against great swords. Lastly, against casters, I felt like it did struggle because casters are very passive, and the weak approach with the Great Corvian Scythe really holds it back here. So yeah, in duels, I felt like this was definitely upper tier. I don't think it's a meta weapon though. I've heard that phrase get thrown around for this weapon. The fact that it's countered so hard by spears and katanas, I wasn't convinced. I don't think this is a meta weapon, just a very high tier weapon. I should also mention, it has kind of I don't want to call it a true combo. Basically, you have this R1, R2, R1. Everybody gets very excited for that. Oh, you can use the R1, R2, R1, right? First of all, the R2 doesn't even always land. Sometimes you go R1, R2, and it turns out they're not in range of that R2. So you actually need to learn the correct spacing for that setup in the first place. You're always safer going R1, R1. That's your R1 combo. If you're going to go R1, R2, you have to know that the opponent is in range of the R2, because the R2 is way shorter than the R1. And then when you get that R1, R2 out, you can then spam the R1 again, and if your opponent panicked rolled, sometimes it catches them and sometimes it doesn't. I can't figure out how to get it to work consistently, but it's just not consistent. Now when it does land, it's awesome. It does like somewhere between like the upper 700s to the 800s in terms of damage. That's a lot. But again, it was very inconsistent, so I just didn't depend on it, and it didn't get me excited. It's honestly not that good. You're better off just using your R1 when they're at top range, the furthest range. Do the R1 combo, and if they're real close, do the R1, R2 combo, and you can try for the third swipe, but it's never guaranteed. For invasions, it was also kind of strange in invasions. So it has like no capacity for chasing. However, the range on it is so long that you can actually hit groups pretty consistently. Like, that's not common either. I was hitting groups, like half the time almost. I would catch more than one of them. So that was really fun. However, not having any poise was not fun. And then having a weak running attack meant that it was hard to finish opponents off. However, on the other hand, you're able to punish heals with the R1, R2, and really punish heals if you get the R1, R2, R1, the full combo. Just tons of damage, like 800 damage. Similar to an ultra weapon, a really good ultra weapon. So it was really strange because in Invasions you could win a lot of fights by outspacing the group, and that's an important thing to do when you're group fighting, is to outspace. So the long range on the weapon was legit, and then the damage was significant. But at the same time, not being able to finish off opponents, and again, not having poise like you would on something like a greatsword, meant that you could be stunned, and the moment you're stunned, you're in a ton of danger in an invasion, because you're usually fighting more than one player, and the other player just runs up and crushes you once you've been stunned. It's very annoying. So, it was above average good for invasions, surprisingly, but it wasn't like mind-blowingly good either. It was a lot of fun, at least, but not going to be a top invasion weapon at all. For PvE, this is an interesting weapon for PvE. So it doesn't actually cost a lot of stamina to use this weapon. You can just spam your R1. You could probably, in fact, I would probably recommend a buffed build for PvE, because you can go sharp, which it gets really good sharp scaling, take it to 40, put the rest of your points in faith or whatever, and you go for the buff build. You're going to do tons of damage with this weapon, and you're going to be able to swing plenty of times into your opponent at range too. So really is probably one of the better PvE weapons. Is certainly not a mediocre PvE weapon. Another interesting thing, you could actually consider a bleed build, because it gets really good bleed build up. The only problem is if you needed to fight a boss or a group of enemies that are immune to bleed, then you would just be kind of in trouble. My favorite thing is when you're doing something like a sharp buffed build with faith, if you really want to do bleed, you can just swap over to Dory's Gnawing, and I find that that's a more consistent way to trigger bleed. So you could pair this with Dory's Gnawing, or you could really go all out on a bleed build. Maybe you're just fighting a particular boss and you want to see how fast you can kill him. Alright, so we've covered duels, invasions, and PvE. Overall, I found that this was a very good weapon, just shy of meta, and I'm afraid that's how it'll have to be for now. I put in a lot of time playing with it, and I would be totally willing to give it another look later. I always love hearing the feedback I get after these videos, because sometimes somebody will unveil something that I hadn't thought of, like how it performs at low level invasion. Something like that always comes up. So I'm totally open to giving this weapon another look, just because it's one of the better weapons in the game. Alright guys, I've got a ton of invasion footage for you. I hope you enjoy that, and as usual, I'll have the text tier ratings at the end of the video. See you next time.
Oh no!
You have been slain.
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
This wench. of the flesh wound.
I'm sorry.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, and you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
What? Still here? Hand it over, that thing, your dark soul. For my lady's painting.
Oh, bother.
Oh, good grief.
Very good.
I will, and the wall just got 10 feet taller.
Today we will be reviewing Craft VinylCheese.